And here in the call, we have Candra Teshome. Did I pronounce that correctly?
It's Teshome. Thank you.
Teshome. You are the Planning and Zoning Liaison for Savannah?
That's correct.
All right. And we have Tom Bolton, the Zoning Plans Examiner for Savannah, and Bridget Lidy, the Director of Planning and Urban Design here in the city. The reason I called for this meeting is because I would like some clarification as to Savannah's historic status as it stands today, because frankly, I've heard a lot of rumors about it, and I've only seen a few news sources kind of covering it. So to start off, could you guys tell me sort of what it means to be a historic city and how you gain that classification?
Of course. So previously I did work for the Metropolitan Planning Commission. We have about 4 historic districts here that are registered at the local and or national level. So there are 2 levels of registration. So you can be nationally recognized with the National Historic Register, or you can be locally recognized, or a combination of both. The difference between the 2 is that the local designation generally is accompanied by an ordinance that pretty much establishes regulations for a specific district in order to protect resources in that district based on the development patterns and necessities for that specific district. So for example, we do have some conservation areas as well, where we are focused on avoiding demolition of existing structures. In other districts, we have regulations in place that manage the design standards in an effort to maintain that place value. The thing about a historic block that was developed in the 1800s or 1700s. So we have several locations here. I'm not exactly an expert on the current status, although I was aware that we were in danger of losing that status. And I'm also aware that we are taking some steps to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, I guess I can fill in where Candra left off. So I guess 2 years ago, the National Park Service did an assessment of our National Landmark District. And with that, our status changed from satisfactory to threatened. And the main reason is because we were having some issues with large scale developments. And there were also some concerns about us not preserving the environment, such as with using an archaeology ordinance and a cultural resources ordinance. And so we're in the process of working on that now. And so we are still currently at a threatened level. By no stretch of the imagination would the report issued from the National Park Service take away our status. It's more of a report card on how we're doing, and right now we're in the threatened status. So we're trying to do multiple different things in order to bring it back up to a satisfactory level.
I see. So what exactly is leading to this threatened status? Is it just new construction?
It's large scale new construction where the buildings are coming in and the historic development patterns are being challenged. For example, if you have a large apartment complex or a hotel that's coming in on a lot that once had a historic lane that went through it, the developer wishes to build over that historic lane, yet the code and the historic development patterns say, hey, time out, you need to restore the lane as part of the development process. And so there's conflict between the developer who is looking at a large-scale development and trying to maximize the development, and then we have the preservationists and the code, which is saying it needs to go a certain pathway in order to preserve the historic development pattern.
Okay.
I can send you a copy of that report if you so wish.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I was also wondering what specific sort of protections are afforded to historical districts. I assume there's a reason you don't want them to become non-historic. for lack of a better term. So what specific like benefits are there to being a historic district?
I think that there's plenty of research that demonstrates that parcels and their associated construction that are within historic local or national districts tend to benefit from higher resale value. Those parcels tend to be higher in terms of their value versus those that are not within the boundaries of a historic district. But that also includes considering the fact that so if you have a structure from the 1800s, but then you have an empty parcel, you come in and you want to build new construction adjacent to that parcel. It makes perfect sense to ensure that the quality of that construction, the setbacks are maintained, the lot coverage is maintained, to just keep the overall feel of that particular district. So I think that essentially it's been proven that there are multiple benefits to preservation, including a sense of place, a sense of time, and then property values. So there are multiple benefits to that.
Are any of you aware of the current construction projects that are threatening the status? I assume, just from being down there, I know River Street is having a whole lot of new hotels being built. And I would assume that's some of them, but do you guys know what the specific ones are?
Sure. So if you want to talk about the specific ones, there was a vacant lot at Oglethorpe and Haversham Street in downtown Savannah. It was owned by the city of Savannah. The city of Savannah declared it surplus property. When it was declared surplus property, the entire parcel, to include the lane that was part of the original development pattern, was also included. So it was just a blank, huge, vacant lot. And when the individuals bid on that, they bid on it thinking that they could build on the entire parcel. When it came to light that indeed the development should include the historic lane that had been there previously, the city worked with the developer to come up with an alternative scenario that was presented to the review body, which is the Historic Preservation Commission, in order to ensure that it was meeting the code. And so that's what kind of happened when we had a large-scale developer come in and try to do a development that wasn't in sync with the code. And that's what transpired.
I have a question, and I'm just going to say this for anyone watching. Here in Savannah, there is a college campus called SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design. And I know that they own quite a lot of the buildings in Savannah. And I have also heard rumors that they might have an impact on Savannah's historical status. Does anyone here know anything about that?
I cannot really speak to that. I cannot really speak to speculation about that. However, what I can say about SCAD is that they have put forth a very good effort in terms of the properties that they have acquired to maintain their historic status. So anytime that SCAD comes in and is working on a project that is associated with a historic district, they definitely go through the process by which to get that done properly.
So when you want to either renovate or buy a historic home, I would assume you have to have a specialty historic team come in to renovate it the correct way? I
wouldn't necessarily say that. That's what the MPC and the city of Savannah are for. Okay, so let's say that I purchase a lot at the end of my street, for example. It could be a vacant lot. it would be very beneficial to work with an architect with historic background. However, that is the process that the MPC will take an individual through. They can submit a permit or a certificate of appropriateness. In the event there is anything that is inappropriate within their plan submittal, then they will work with them vigorously through that process. However, as Bridget had mentioned, we are ironing out the archaeology ordinance so that we not only focus on things that are above ground, but also those things that are below ground at this time related to city property. So in answer to your question, I do not believe at all that you have to have a full-time, fully dedicated team of archaeologists and historic preservationists to meet the guidelines of the city of Savannah. However, that would make it easier.
Are there any, it doesn't sound really like it from our conversation, but are there any construction limitations on Savannah? And what I mean by that is, it seems like high-rises and more modern buildings threaten our historic status, but at the same time, it doesn't seem like the city is that opposed to having them built. So are there any limitations right now on construction?
I wouldn't, okay. Speaking specifically of height, we do have a height map that we must abide by. And that was meticulously created. So depending on the adjacency of a parcel within a historic district or outside of it and adjacent to it, there are construction restrictions that are in place in terms of height. However, I think your questions would better be answered by reviewing the historic district ordinances to get a better understanding of what those restrictions are.
And what they have are a series of visual compatibility requirements that have to be met, as well as development standards. And with the visual compatibility piece, there's a lot of flexibility in there to pull in modern designs in the context of a historic district, provided that it's visually compatible with the surrounding area. So you can, even though you're building a property in 2020, you can use modern building materials. You can use, new trends in the architecture world to incorporate into your design, provided that it meets the standards.
That's absolutely correct, Bridget. In addition, for example, if you're doing alterations to an existing historic structure, you are required not to mimic history. So there are design standards that take into account current construction practices, while also trying to preserve the sense of place, that I think are very flexible.
Is there a way to create sort of new historic zones? Like if an area of the city has been there for a specific amount of time, will it become a historic zone, or can it be sort of quarantined off to become one later on?
So there's a process that occurs where the area has to be surveyed to determine whether or not the buildings or the area can be considered historic. Once that has been determined, then an application is submitted to the state, and then from the state, they review the information, and then they pass it along to the U.S. Department of Interior, where they go ahead and review that information to determine whether or not the information provided in the report is accurate and correct. And from that, they can go ahead and designate a historic district. And one of the most recent ones that we did was an area called Historic Carver Village, which is in the western part of our city. And with that designation, the city moved forward in designating that to be a conservation district in our zoning code in order to provide some protections for demolition, as well as preserving the lot pattern that was in the neighborhood. Okay. So there is a process that is followed in the event that we so desire to establish additional historic districts.
Mm-hmm.
And keep in mind, we do have historic districts within the city of Savannah that are not, they do not have any kind of development standards or zoning standards in order to protect the types of activities that are going on with development and building in the areas. But then we do have some that have standards, and then we have, of course, the National Landmark Historic District, which probably has the most defined and regimented regulations.
And Candra, I think earlier you mentioned there were 4. Can you tell me where those are located in the city?
Of course. So we have the Savannah Downtown Historic District, which is closest to River Street. Mm-hmm. And then we have the Victorian District, which is exactly south of and these are all adjacent to each other. So we have the Victorian Historic District, which is directly south of the Savannah Downtown Historic District. Directly south of the Victorian District, which is probably the smallest district we have, the Victorian one, is the Streetcar Historic District. That was previously the Mid-City Historic District. And then to the west of the Streetcar Historic District, and almost maintaining the same southern boundaries, is the Kyler-Brownsville Historic District. And then outside of that, we have the Carver-Flatman Village Conservation District, which Bridget just mentioned. We also have Ardsley Park, which is a conservation district. We have Ardmore and Parkside. Those are both conservation districts as well.
All right. Very good. Those are all the questions I have had prepared for you guys today. That being said, I would like to sort of keep looking into this a little bit more. If you guys know of any construction companies that might have their fingers in historic architecture or remodeling for these parts of the city, I'd really love to reach out to them.
Here's an image, y'all, of the local historic districts. So you see all the ones that Candra was talking about.
Yeah. I see. Okay.
Thank you, Bridget.
That can wrap it up if you guys need to go. Like I said, if you know of anyone who might be willing to talk with us further about this topic, I'd really like to keep looking into it.
Tom, would you know anybody?
I'd have to look and see. I'll see what I can come up with and get him a list.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that.
Not a problem. Have you reached out to the City Preservation Office?
I think I did, and I haven't heard back from them yet. I'll reach out to them again.
Because they would have a little bit more information for you as far as the preservation, the process, and everything else. Mm-hmm. I wasn't exactly prepared to talk about preservation today, but we're good. But I'll see if I can come up with a couple of contractors who I know do a lot of work in the historic district, and see if they want to get in touch with you, and we'll see what we can do.
That'd be wonderful. I'd appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thanks for inviting me, Gavin. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you all for coming.
Nice to meet you, Gavin. You too, Richard. Y'all have a great afternoon.
Yeah, and if y'all need help with the recording thing, just let me know. But I think, Richard, you're good with it, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think I got it now.
Okay, good deal. Well, if you need anything else, just let us know.
All right, thank you.
All right, y'all stay safe.
You too.